Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hi, everyone. This is Tammy Patzer, and I'm really happy today because I'll be discussing some interesting topics with Gina Osborn. Chaos, crisis, and change. And as all of you know, we certainly have had a lot of chaos, crisis, and change in our lives in recent years. So I just want to tell you a little bit about Gina. Gina Osborn is an expert in navigating chaos, crisis, and change. She's responded to catastrophic terrorist attacks and cyber hacks as an FBI special agent, and she's chased Cold War spies while serving in the Army. She knows that crises can be managed, chaos can be controlled, and change is inevitable. Gina serves through speaking, coaching, and hosting executive roundtables, VIP days, and masterminds. She provides tools and techniques to eliminate self-imposed obstacles, stop tolerating the intolerable, and helps you have the courage to lead authentically and create clarity and confidence to become unstoppable. Welcome, Gina.
Thank you, Tammy, for having me.
This is a really interesting topic because I'm thinking to myself, here you are, someone who has responded to terrorist attacks and Cold War spy issues and everything. And now you're bringing all that expertise into, I guess, the private sector, into the business world. So tell me a little bit more about how you have become this authority navigating chaos, conflict, and change.
Well, having spent 28 years in law enforcement and, like you said, reacting and responding to some of the most catastrophic attacks that we've seen in our history over the last 20 years, 25 years, I would say, I've taken the skill set that I've learned as a result of dealing with those crises and dealing with the chaos surrounding that. And I work with my clients and help them navigate and lead through chaos, crisis, and change because I was able to do it. And I have those skills and I want to share those with my clients.
It's funny because right now it seems like everyone is living in some sort of chaos. So what would you say is the best way to manage the chaos that seems to be seeping into our lives?
You know, it starts with understanding what our core values are. That's the number one thing. I think it's really, we have to take some time just to understand who we are and what we believe. And then from there, we need to set priorities. Right now, I think everyone is looking at their lives and everything is a priority. Well, we need to narrow that down because once we figure out what our priorities are, then we can get rid of everything else, focus on that, and feel more organized. And also, we have to identify what it is that we're tolerating. That is so important because if we're tolerating everything in our lives, then that's when the chaos seems to seep in. But what I tell people is if you make a list of all of those things you're tolerating, and it can be as simple as the leaky faucet in the kitchen to as complicated as relationships, I'll tell you, whenever I walk into the kitchen and I've got a leaky faucet, I feel it's just one more thing I have to deal with. But then when it's fixed, I feel really good about it. So if we can write down a list of all of our tolerations and then just eliminate them one by one, we're going to create enough space to be able to deal with our priorities and move forward versus being in a holding pattern with all the chaos in our life.
That's really interesting because sometimes when you said that, it can be as simple as tolerating something like a leaky faucet, or maybe there's somebody leaves a towel on the floor and they never pick it up. I mean, it can be little teeny issues. So I wanted to ask you to maybe expand on that. What happens when chaos turns into a crisis? How would you suggest that people handle that?
Well, when you allow all of your tolerations to build up, whether it's at work or in your personal life, that's when the crisis comes in. Because, little things that we tolerate, that's one thing, but the more we have to tolerate, it's going to sap our energy. It's going to turn into something worse. And so whenever I had to deal with a crisis, I always made sure that I had a team, that I surrounded myself with the best possible people. And it's not the people who are going to be taking our energy away. It's the people who are going to help us again move forward. And that's where the whole unstoppable things come from. And another thing in dealing with a crisis, you can't take things personally. Again, whether it be in business or whether it be in our personal lives, because when we take things personally, it becomes all about us, and it's not about dealing with the crisis and finding resilience. So that's why it's so important that when we're dealing with a crisis, we need to surround ourselves with the people who can help us. And then again, don't take things personally and make it about us. Let's make it about the crisis and getting past it.
Yeah, that good old ego seems to get in the way of a lot of things. And sometimes it stops us from change, and even when that change might be leading us on a better path than what we've had before. So since change is inevitable, what is the best way to handle change? And again, this can be related to a job, personal relationships. Change, again, it's inevitable. How do you suggest that we handle that?
So we can see change in two ways. We can see it as a problem, we can see it as an obstacle, or we can see it as an opportunity. And that's how I like to see change. We don't know when change happens, if it's going to be a good thing for us, but I'm a big believer in everything happens for a reason. So we have to keep that optimism when it comes to change. I was in the FBI when 9/11 happened, and that was probably the biggest change that the FBI had seen in its 100-year existence, in its history. We went from an investigative agency to becoming an intelligence agency, and it was turning the ship around that was very, very difficult. So when you're dealing with massive change like that, it's so important to remain open-minded. And it's going to be hard, but again, surrounding yourself with good people, not taking things personally, and having the courage to really move forward instead of, again, staying in that holding pattern. That's really important as well.
It's funny when you mentioned 9/11. Immediately, I went to some of the changes in travel. Like, for example, when I flew later in September that year, my underwire bra set the alarms off at the airport. And then also I found out that I had metal in my shoes.
Oh my goodness.
Alarms off. So that just triggered that memory of, that was a huge change. I mean, as an example of how change affected millions and millions of people in just how we traveled. So right now, especially, I think we all are seeking calm. when with what you do, who would you say are the people that would reach out to you? Are they people who are seeking to calm their life down a little bit?
Well, I think that's part of it, but really I work with executives and entrepreneurs to be able to lead through chaos, crisis, and change. So those are the types of people who will reach out to me if they're having a crisis, if they're in the middle of a crisis, for me to work with them or work with their teams in order to come up with solutions to get through a crisis. And also, it could be in their business, or it can even be in their personal lives when they're seeking that they're getting to that boiling point that we feel that we just can't take it anymore. People will reach out to me and I help them navigate all of the things that they're going through and then help them identify priorities, get rid of everything else in order to be able to move forward. And really, that's where a lot of the calm comes from. When you know who you are by identifying your core values, when you have priorities, when you've eliminated your tolerations, you'd be surprised at how much space that you have, not only to move forward, but also to see around corners to prevent chaos and prevent crisis from coming into your life.
So the different services you provide, then can you recap those for me in that? Because you were saying that you help them make these navigational changes. And I imagine you also might be able to say pinpoint issues. So what does that look like?
So I am a coach, and so I do one-on-one coaching. I do executive roundtables. I have something I call a VIP day, where I'll spend an entire day with an executive to just really go through what is going on in their business or what's going on with their life and provide suggestions for solutions. I also speak. I'm a speaker. I go out and speak to groups about this and of leadership. I worked in a male-dominated field for 28 years, and so I have a presentation that I give to women to talk about how to lead like a lady and embrace your femininity in the workplace. So those are the different types of services that I provide.
With that, do you have anything that you could provide to our listeners today that might help them deal with chaos, conflict, and change?
Absolutely. I have an ebook. If your listeners go to my website, Gina L. Osborn, OSBORN.com, they are able to get an ebook that I've written, and that is the 7 key ways to eliminate chaos from your business and your life. So that's for your listeners. That is my gift to them. If they go to my website, they can get that from there.
So that was Gina L. Osborn.com.
Yes.
/book.
Yes.
Or does it come up on the front?
It'll be on the homepage, so they'll be able to see it on the homepage.
Great. You I kind of chuckled to myself when you said that you actually have a talk, or you speak about how to lead like a lady. And it's always funny because I see different memes and everything, because women, I think, are very, very strong leaders. And I don't think women get enough accolades for those leadership abilities. And of course, if we're assertive, that means we're aggressive, and, all of these different things. So what are the, besides leading like a lady, what are some of your other topics that you speak on?
Well, the leading like a lady, I just want to let you know that going into the military, going into the FBI, and when I went into the FBI, fewer than about 14% of the FBI agents were women. And I think when women get into an environment which is a male-dominated field, they take on characteristics that are male-driven when it comes to leadership. But as I look back on my almost 30-year career, I learned that all of my personal skill set, collaboration, networking, communication, which are more, looked at as soft skills, the more I embraced those, the more authentic I led and the more successful I was. But as far as other topics I speak on, I speak about leading through chaos, crisis, and change. I talk about collaboration, and I have different leadership talks as well.
That's exciting to me. I would love to hear about your leadership talks. Also, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about, you have the free ebook at GinaLosborn.com. If somebody wants to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to reach out?
The best way is to go to my website, GinaLosborn.com. And if they want to book a 30-minute free, no pitch, I promise, clarity call, I am happy to speak with anyone who is looking for some clarity to see how I can help. One thing that I'm really, really passionate about is helping women become unstoppable, helping women just go through any obstacles that they're dealing with. And so I love to speak to women. I'm on the Girl Scouts board of directors for the Girl Scouts of Orange County. And again, that's something that I'm passionate about. So they can go onto my website, they can book a call, and we can talk about how I can assist them in finding clarity or calm with their chaos, crisis, and change.
I'm a fellow Girl Scout.
Good, yes.
My scribe badge, and I can really attribute being a Girl Scout to leading me on this path where I became a journalist. And of course, I have the podcast and different authority type services. So you also host a podcast, and this is really exciting because podcasting now, of course, is becoming more and more popular. Tell me more about your podcast.
My podcast is called Behind the Crime Scene, and it's a true crime podcast. And what I do is I go beyond the yellow tape and into the lives of first responders, investigators, and prosecutors. And they talk about notorious cases that have haunted them throughout their careers. So really, it humanizes law enforcement. And we've done some really big notorious cases. I just did a 3-part series on the Aurora, Colorado movie theater massacre. And I had the former police chief of Aurora, Colorado, as well as the FBI special agent in charge who responded to the event, and they did the investigation. So they were on, and there's a lot of leadership lessons there that they talked about and what they had to deal with that, with that mass murderer that they arrested. And it was fascinating because he left his entire apartment booby trapped. So they talk about how they were able to get into the apartment using their bomb technicians and make that safe. So it's really a fascinating case.
So you did that case. What other podcast cases have you covered, or cases have you covered in your podcast?
So we also had the BTK serial killer. That was a really interesting case because the FBI supervisor at the time that he was arrested, when he was 10 years old, he grew up in that area in Kansas. I think it was Kansas City. And when he was 10 years old, he would go out with his cousins and they would talk about BTK, and they would scare themselves so much they would have to run into the house. And then you fast forward 20 years or so, and he was in charge of the investigation on the FBI side that actually got apprehended the BTK serial killer. And also we did a show on O.J. Simpson. We had Marsha Clark's boss on, and he talked about what haunted him with regard to the trial and the fact that he was acquitted. So that was a really, really interesting case that we had on as well.
That's really interesting. So can you reveal what haunted him?
He goes into his name is Bill Hodgman. And like I said, he was Marsha Clark's boss and one of the lead prosecutors on the case. And he told us, and it was probably about 6 minutes of exactly, based on all of the evidence that he saw, exactly what happened at Nicole Brown Simpson's house, her condo, in that little area where both she and Ron Goldman were killed. And the fact that O.J. Simpson was found not guilty, that haunted him. And it was a specific date when OJ was arrested for what he was doing in Las Vegas. I think there was some sort of, robbery that he was involved in, why he wound up going to prison. But yeah, that was the thing that really kind of haunted him, was the fact that he was found not guilty, and wondering whether or not he could have done something to change it, wondering whether or not, what was going on in Los Angeles at the time had something to do, whether it was payback for Rodney King. So he was definitely haunted by that case for sure.
So do you have any upcoming shows that you can tease us with?
So in 2 weeks, I am going to have an FBI agent who wound up becoming the legal attaché in Hong Kong. His name is Kingman Wong, and he's going to talk about how he worked Asian organized crime back in the 90s and took out a major Asian organized crime group called the Wo Hop To. So that's a really, really interesting. I've already done the interview on that. So I'm looking forward to getting that one out. And then I also do a monthly update on Ghislaine Maxwell. I worked crimes against children for the FBI for 5 years. And so I'm really fascinated with the Jeffrey Epstein case and what's going on with Ghislaine Maxwell. So once a month, I'll have a Maxwell Chronicles is what I call it, and invite people to listen to the updates on what's going on in her case.
Well, I'm very intrigued. What can you remind us what the name of your show is and all the different places where people can listen to it?
Sure. It's Behind the Crime Scene, and they can go on our website, behindthecrimescene.com, and they can also listen through their favorite podcast provider, whether it be Apple or Spotify, any of those. We're everywhere.
Behindthecrimescene.com. Wow. So we have talked a lot about your podcast and Behind the Crime Scene. And the thing about your podcast that I think is really interesting is I know that you do a lot of, I guess, let's call it production, because you have to do the interviews and then you're telling these stories. So you put a lot of work into producing your podcast. How long does it take you to produce each show?
It depends on whether or not, because I really like to tell the story. That's what's really important to me, is to really have our listeners feel like they're going on a journey with our guest. So it takes me probably at least a day or so. I also have help. I've got a producer who just so happens to be my sister. She's a very, very good producer, and that's what she does, is produce podcasts. So I'm very fortunate in that. But it takes me about a good day in order to get it all done.
Wow, that's cool. So I just want to remind everyone that we've been speaking with Gina Osborn, and she is an expert in navigating chaos, crisis, and change. So you can go to GinaOsborn.com and you can make an appointment for, she says, a free discovery call, and maybe she can help you figure a few things out. And she says that's a no pitch call, which that should make all of us feel very confident, because that way you know that when you contact Gina, you can get some really good focused help in that call. And then of course she has the free ebook that you can find at her website. What was the name of the ebook again, Gina?
It's called 7 Key Ways to Eliminate Chaos from Your Business and Your Life.
7 Key Ways to Eliminate Chaos from Your Business and Your Life. And I think that we both agree that you are much, much needed in the world today, because I know for a fact that we're all dealing with a lot more chaos and a lot more crisis in our lives, and we need to learn how to navigate that so that we can restore that calm. So Gina, before I let you go, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I just thank you very much for having me on the show, and I look forward to having everyone take a look at the ebook.
Great. So thank you so much, Gina. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Everyone, this is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.